So for the question and answer part of the format, after Dr. Jamei speaks and moderated by Nancy Murray, when you want to ask questions, there are baskets on either side of the room on these tables with 3x5 cards. Just write your question or comment, and Nancy or I will take those. And as part of the moderated discussion with our in our hybrid format on Zoom, we have Lisa Reisner in the top center moderating the Zoom part of this. And so people here in the hall, you'll write your questions on the 3x5 cards. People in the Zoom audience will put your questions in the chat room, and Lisa will pick those up. Unless there are any questions, I'm going to ask Siri to say a word.
Thank you, Kirk. And I'm so glad to see you all here and everyone that's online today. And of course, welcome to our distinguished guests. I just want to say the way that this connects for us as a church community is we really believe fundamentally that God calls us to care about the world beyond the walls of our church, and that we do the work of God. The more we care, the more we're involved, the closer we are to God's heart. But of course, it all starts with education, right? And so when we learn about what's happening, our hearts open, and then we can make informed action. And so today, I hope and pray that you've come with an open heart and open mind as we listen to the realities on the ground in Gaza. And I just would like to open us by inviting the Spirit of God to be in our midst as well. Let's pray together. Loving God, we thank you that there's nothing that's going to be said here today that you don't already know. And Lord, every person, from the oldest to the youngest, even down to those whose names are not known, you already know what we're going through in this life, but especially the people in parts of our world that are suffering, like Gaza. And we ask today, God, that we would play a part of that wonderful work of liberation that you do by learning the stories and by opening our hearts to be grieved, Lord, in the ways that your heart is grieved. Bless us now, be in our midst, and we look forward to what you have to teach us today through our special guests. In your name we pray. Amen.
We're very grateful to St. John's Norwood for hosting this event, and our co-sponsors, the Holy Land Committee of the Episcopal Diocese of Washington, Pax Christi, Baltimore, Maryland chapter, Jewish Voice for Peace, Metro, DC, the USA Palestine Mental Health Network, and the Episcopal Peace Fellowship have all contributed. We're delighted to see you, and we have a format of Dr. Jamei is going to talk about conditions in Gaza. And we have three guests with us today, Dr. James Gordon, Dr. Richard Sheffitz, and Catherine Sheffitz are all specialists in trauma and psychotherapies of different kinds. All have been to Gaza, and so they're going to respond after Dr. Jamei's questions, and then they will sort of give something that really resonates or hits them as particularly important. Administratively, we have sign-in sheets, little half pieces of paper if you'd like to fill it out and get information about any of the co-sponsoring organizations. But thank you for being with us, and we look forward to this conversation.
Yeah. I'd like to start things off by introducing myself. I'm Nancy Murray. I'm the president of the Gaza Mental Health Foundation. Now, people get confused because they think I'm the president of Dr. Yasser's foundation. No, he is the director general of the Gaza Community Mental Health Program in the Gaza Strip. This organization is based in Cambridge, Massachusetts. It's 501c3. It can take tax-deductible contributions. And there are a number of brochures like this one over there I hope you take one and you'll find out more about our work. We've been in existence for 20 years. His organization has been in existence for 30 years. It was founded in 1990 by Dr. Yasser's predecessor, Dr. Iyad El-Sarraj. And there's another sheet there which will give you some information about what it has done over the years. But right now, I would like to introduce Dr. Yasser Abu Jamei, who is, as I said, the Director General of the Gaza Community Mental Health Program, which is an independent, non-governmental group in the Gaza Strip that is the major, in fact, the most important mental health organization in the Gaza Strip. It has a wide range of activities that it carries out, treatment, training, and so on, which he will talk about. He took over from Dr. El-Sarraj after Dr. El-Sarraj's death. He became the head of the organization in 2014. Since then, he has received numerous awards, including from one of his universities, which is the University of Birmingham in the UK. He's also studied in Gaza, he studied in Lithuania, and he studied in Germany. And he is a neuropsychiatrist. I think that's what you would call it, a neuropsychiatrist with great expertise in trauma. So thank you, guests, for coming and being discussants. We will now hear from him, I think, for about 15 minutes, and then I would ask you each to give your impressions, say something. If something strikes you in particular, please add that to the discussion. And then if people have questions, I hope you write it down. I will take your questions. I'll act as facilitator. So, I think, where do you want to speak from? Here or there or what? So he is going to speak from the mic. So, okay.
Good afternoon, everyone. Do you hear me well?
No.
No. I think now it's better. Should I make it louder? Okay. It's really an honor and pleasure to be today here with you among this wonderful group of people. I would begin by thanking the sponsors. Okay. The sponsors, the discussants, the audience, people who are in person here and people who are over the Zoom. And I hope that I haven't forgotten any one. But it's really such a pleasure to be here today with you. And I was given 15 minutes to talk a little bit about the work that we are doing and about the conditions in Gaza Strip. I think I'll go with that mic. Sorry? I'll go with that. Yeah, okay.
It doesn't matter. Yeah. يا بس احكي فيها حطها قدامك يعني.
So, I hope this is better. Okay. As Nancy said, we began in 1990, you know, that's almost 33 years ago. Well, in a few months, it will be 33 years. We began in April 1990, and the idea came to answer the question, which is a very simple one. In the 80s, we were having the first intifada. I'm sure that most of you know that. And Iyad El-Sarraj, who is a psychiatrist and a human rights activist, was wondering, how can we help the families and the children in Gaza Strip? And at that time, the only facility that was there was the psychiatric hospital. And you know, the psychiatric hospital is a place that is for acute psychiatric emergencies, if we could say, or patients who need hospitalization, needs inpatient. Well, to him, it was apparent that this is not the best way. How can we really provide comprehensive mental health services that gives good care and in the same time respect children, respect women, respect the population, and do not cause that much stigmatization about the seeking help behavior? And that's how, with a group of young people at that time, a small group of people, I think less than 9 people, they opened the first community mental health center, I think ever, not only in Palestine, but in the Middle East. It was a very modern one in the idea that it's not only a psychiatrist who's working there. It should be a multidisciplinary team formed by the psychiatrist, a psychologist, a social worker, and the nurse together. They could offer comprehensive mental health services to the population in Gaza Strip. Over the time, we opened a second clinic in Khan Yunis in the south and the third clinic in Deir al-Balah in the middle. And when I say in the Gaza north, or say in the south, and then I say in the middle, it sounds a little bit funny to me, at least, you know, having in mind the geographical area that I talk about, and that is divided into north, south, middle, blah, blah, blah. It's just about 26 miles in length and 8 to 12 miles in width. That is about 140 square miles. But over that small geographical area, at the moment live more than 2.3 million people. So you can imagine how the density of the population, more than 14,000 people per square mile. I think it's the highest in the world, maybe the second or third. And over the years, we continue to feel that it's not enough that you provide those services, you know. Why? Because the demands continue to grow and grow. Why? Because the living conditions, you know, continue to get worse and worse. With the year 2000, the second intifada began. And with that second intifada, a lot of things happened. 7 years later, we had the blockade on Gaza Strip. And within now 15 years of a blockade, Gaza Strip was subjected to different military operations, you know. The well-known of them are like maybe 4 or 5, 2008, 2009, that's one. The second, 2012, then 2014, 2021. And then there was a 3-day one in August 2022. Now, these attacks come on a population that is not only overcrowded, you know, but that population has over 2/3 of it refugees, 1.4 million refugees who live in Gaza Strip. And then the other statistics that are important to keep in mind is the socioeconomic indicators, you know, because a lot of people would think, how are those people doing, you know, in terms of economy, for example. Nowadays, economic conditions are like this. Unemployment rate is between 47 to 53%. It depends on which quarter you look at. Unemployment among the young people below the age of 30 grows up as to 60%. For girls, it goes up even more than 70%. That's how the unemployment rates in Gaza Strip. When it comes to the poverty rate, about half of the population is under poverty line. And it's very important to keep that in mind because 48% of the population are children. So you can guess that there are at least 1.1 million children who live in Gaza Strip. Now you have this combination that half of the population are children. So you have more than 500,000 children live under poverty rate. And they are exposed to trauma every now and then. And I'll start by telling a story about how that sounds, which is a story of each mother in Gaza Strip. And that's the daily life that mothers have. Well, you know, on average, we have, I think, about 5, maybe 5.1 to a little bit more, a little bit less of children per family in Gaza Strip, you know. And our schools operate on 2 shifts, you know, because of the limited number of buildings. So you have to share the building. So you have one full school that works in the morning, another full school that works in the afternoon. Full school, I mean different students or children, different teachers, different management, everything is different, you know, but they share the same building. And for that reason, you have the morning shift, which begins about 7 and they end around 11:30. The other group begins at noon and then about 4:30, something like that. What does that mean in terms of daily life? You know, first, you have to wake up something like about 6 a.m. Why? Because you need to prepare the first group of children. It could be 2 to 3 children because they go to the morning shift. You prepare them, which means clothing, feeding, making sure that everything is fine. And then they are on their way to the school. 3 hours later, the second group of children, they need to go to the school, the afternoon shift. And it's again the same story. food, clothes, everything is fine, and then they go to school. Well, however, 30 minutes later, maximum an hour later, the morning shift is returning back. So she needs to prepare the lunch, take care of everything, you know, everything is in place, check whether there is a homework or not, how was the school, blah, 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 and within another like 2 or 3 hours, the afternoon shift is arriving home. So that's how is life for any woman who has kids who go to schools. And those are, of course, tens of thousands of families. Now, this is something we could say bearable, but let's add to that that what if she goes to work? Unemployment rate among women is really high, but still a lot of women go to work. I think around 1/4 of women who work, I mean, of the population of the employees who work for the governmental sector are women. So you can think that there are plenty of them working. And if you add to that the problems that we have with power supply, you know, on average, we have 8 hours on, 8 hours off. That's the best power supply we have. Nowadays, because of the cold weather and the increased demand in power, it goes into like 6 on and 10 hours off. So let's have in mind also that half of the children are under poverty rate. To live under poverty rate means that you are probably, you'll just have 1 set of clothes for the school. And that's, it could be from the previous year, but you have that 1 set of clothes because you have 5 kids. So imagine that one of the children is coming back and due to the mud or due to the weather, that clothes are dirty and they need cleaning. Now there are 1 of 2 questions, you know, or situations or conditions. One is that the power supply is on, and the other one is that there is no power supply. And we have 3 golden, you know, times in Gaza: 6 a.m., 2 p.m., and 10 p.m. And these are very important because these are the moment that you get the power supply coming back or it just cuts off. When it's terrible winter or when it's very hot summer, that goes to a little bit, only 6 hours on and 10 hours off. So the question is, now it's 6 p.m., we need to do the clothing, the washing of the clothes, you know. If the power is on, she has 4 hours to do the clothes washing and to do the ironing and to prepare the set for tomorrow's morning. If the power is not there, then she has 2 options. One, to do it by hand, or to wait until 10 p.m. in order to be able to do the washing using the washing machines. So that's how the regular daily life of a woman, not to keep in mind that she has to take care of herself, isn't it? That she has also to think, what should I do? Does she have time for TV, for example, for reading, for sport, for like, you know, to look into the diet or whatever? Because after all, we are normal human beings, you know, we have to live like everyone else, to go to the balance and to check how is our weight. Maybe we need a few kilometers more, or kilograms more or less, and we have to work on that, but we don't really have that much time on this. So that's how the daily life looks like in Gaza, you know. But also, let's keep in mind that it's not only the socioeconomic conditions that are terrible. Every now and then, we are exposed to a large-scale military operation attack. Now, figures are various, you know. For example, 500,000 people were displaced from their houses in 2014. That included 100,000 people whose houses were destroyed or living residences were destroyed. So they had no place to return to. And they continued to be as IDPs, internally displaced people, until reconstruction began. And that happens usually, it begins after 1 year from the destruction. Most of the houses that were destroyed in May 2021, until now, they are not rebuilt yet. Well, we do a lot of work with the children because these are our most important target. We do a lot of work with the adults alike. We are the only organization that offers comprehensive mental health services, which means that you have multidisciplinary teams, again, as I said, and that's why we are entitled to see patients, whether these are children or adults, women or men. In our 3 community centers, we have, for example, 3 play therapy rooms. And these are very important when you allow the children to go into that room and try to start playing, you know. Because when you ask the child, what's wrong? How are you doing today? Usually you don't get a good enough answer. But if you ask the child to go and pick one of the toys in the room and start playing with it, then you will understand what's wrong or what's right. Then you might understand what's the issue. If it's not play therapy, then it's art therapy. You ask them to draw something, you know. And still coming to our community centers is not that much, let me say, accepted. Stigma is still there. A lot of people will come, of course, but still stigma is there. There is a story about one of the girls who live in Deir al-Balah in the middle area, and she was referred to us because of bedwetting, you know. And I asked the clinicians, I was visiting the clinic, tell me more about that girl. She is like between 11 and 12. She started to have bedwetting after the May 2021 attacks. So I told them why that is happening. Well, she lives on a very small 3-story building at the eastern side of Deir al-Balah, and she lives on the ground floor. There is a second floor, there is a third floor. A tank shell was just hit I think the 3rd floor, causing a big fire on the 3rd floor. Thank God it didn't penetrate and go down. But anyway, they were in the building and they just left the building when that happened. They managed to leave. Everyone was safe, because the only safe place that is available to us is not a shelter, but you just go to a lower floor. You just try to hide from the window. You just find a place that there are walls but not windows. And so they survived, they left, they returned to their place later on. But imagine, first, they returned to live in the same place, which luckily survived. But there is a 3rd story that is still that reminds people of what really happened. Anyway, the girl started to improve, which means that her bedwetting stopped. It's getting less frequent. And then I asked, out of curiosity, I mean, that is a horrific experience that they stayed in that house. Usually we flee. I mean, I leave the flat because I live in the eastern side of Khan Younis. Whenever the attacks began, you need to leave, basically. And they said something interesting. They said, well, it's not only her. She lives with her family, who has another 2 boys. One is about 7 and the other one is about 3. And they asked, how is the 7-year-old boy doing? And they said, they are not doing well. Why? The boy sleeps under the bed. I said, what do you mean he sleeps under? Well, he still, you know, every night he just sleeps under the bed. And I asked why he was not referred to our clinic. They said, we visited the house. We talked to the father, we talked to the mother. We asked them to refer the kid to the community center. They were not going to refer him. The father, who is an engineer, said, well, you know, most of the kids in the neighborhood, they do the same. Hopefully he will recover, you know. Why should I send my child to therapy? So there is some resistance about seeking mental health intervention. WHO said in 2021, more than 200,000 people are in need for mental health services in Gaza Strip, and they would have severe to moderate mental health disorder. Why? Because they say on average 10% of any population under conflict area or living in conflict area will have 10% of them having mental disorders. UNICEF issued a report in July 2022, that's less than 5 months ago. And they say that they have done a research study. They found that 8 out of 10 children have emotional distress. When it comes to parents, most of the parents feel unhappy and not satisfied, more than 90%. 62% of parents feel that they are useless. Is that a surprise? I am not surprised, really. Half of the population, I mean, half of the people are unemployed. Half are under poverty line. You cannot afford to buy things. You cannot afford to buy a dignified life to your children. You cannot pay 1 shekel per day for each of your children to go to buy something from the sandwich, then how can you feel as a father? Are you a useful one? That's a question. When the attacks are taking place and there is no place to hide, what can you do when more than 2/3 of the people who are killed or injured are, according to UN agencies, are civilians? In 2014, more than 80 families were completely removed from the civil records. All members of those families were killed, 80. And the well-known story, 27 people of my extended family passed away in one attack. They were all killed in a glimpse of a second at sunset in Ramadan in 2014, including 17 children, including 3 pregnant women. I think 5 families were completely erased. That's why when attacks happen, the psyche works in a very different way. Some people, they say, well, we all the time stay together and sleep in the same room, whether it's in our building or whether we go to a different place. Why? Because if we die, we would like to die together. We move to the next life together. That's our hope, that we stick together no matter what. Other families, they think of it in a different way. They send some members of their family to live with their cousins, Okay, 2 can go to that family, 2 that can go to that family. So if something wrong happens, then at least someone will survive and continue to carry the name. So we continue to operate under these difficult conditions, and I'll end up with this. Last year, we have seen more than 20,000 people, children, 5,000 children. Some of them we saw in the schools, some of them we saw in sport clubs, some of them we dealt with in kindergartens. Our outreach activities are massive because we are fighting with stigma, educating the community, bringing more awareness and attention to our community centers and our services. Patients with diagnoses that we received at our 3 community centers, more than 4,400, including about 1,300 children. Most of the children came because of PTSD. The most common diagnosis was bedwetting. Adults, more than 40% came with depression. 30% came with anxiety or trauma-related disorders. And I think we continue to struggle with the socioeconomic conditions and the ongoing destruction that happens every now and then we continue to deal with the traumas that happen every now and then. So we continue to struggle with that. We hope that we will be able to continue to support the psychological well-being of the population in Gaza Strip as much as we could. We are a non-governmental organization. We rely really a lot on donations. About 60% of our budget is secured through European governments, but we all the time look and try to raise funds in order to support our work. So thank you very much. I'll keep it at this for the time sake. Thank you.
Yeah, before I ask our discussants to comment, I just want to add that the Gaza Mental Health Foundation sends 100% of everything it raises to the Gaza Strip. We're all volunteers, and our board of directors cover the overhead costs. So 100% goes for that. Yeah. Any comments from? Yeah.
Work to have blatant pay like the kind of Francis Bacon.
First of all, welcome, Yasser. Great to see you. The Gaza Community Mental Health Program is an extraordinary institution and an extraordinarily important part of the life of people in Gaza. And it has, as you can read Dr. Abu Jamei's biography, little biography you have, you'll see perhaps the latest flowering, the latest kinds of services, but their services grow and change to meet the needs of people in Gaza. So it's really remarkable. And I first came to Gaza in 2002 at the invitation of Ayad El-Sarraj, who a colleague and became good friends over the years. And I think the spirit that he brought is still maintained. It is the spirit of service. It is the spirit of making psychiatry and mental health truly in the service of the people. And I think you can hear that this morning, and you read about it. It's very apparent. And that's, unfortunately, some of the spirit that we've lost here in our community mental health program, which has been decimated here in the United States. When I first came in, Yasser said to me, "I haven't seen you in Gaza for a while. How come? What's happened?" And we were laughing about that, but it's serious also. And I said, "I'll try to come back this summer." I've been 20 times, but I haven't been in recent years. And it's not that the team of the Center for Mind-Body Medicine that I head up, they don't need me there. They're very accomplished. They work in partnership with Gaza Community Mental Health Program, with the Ministry of Health, Ministry of Education. They do great work, but it is the sense of isolation and separateness that I want to really focus on here. That one of the more painful things is that sense of being isolated from and neglected by the world. And that contributes to and compounds all of the psychological and many of the medical issues that face the people of Gaza. So this is really, this is an important gathering. And Mary, thank you for organizing this. And Nancy, thank you for the foundation. Because I think one of the most important things that we can do is stay in touch with people in Gaza, and also do whatever we can. And Mary asked me to talk a little bit about how to bring what's happening in Gaza more to the attention of the American people. And I think that's crucial. I think it's important for people to go. The more of you who are able to go, to me, it's a very welcoming place. I think I know more people on the streets of Gaza than I knew on the streets of Washington, D.C. right now. And it's also important that you be there, that you experience it, and that you bring the experience of the people in Gaza out into the world. And everybody will do that in different ways. And I think it is possible to do. And I think people here in Washington who have connection potentially to people in Congress, policymakers, that you have the opportunity, perhaps, and I take the opportunity every time I can to talk to those people about what's happening in Gaza. And I do that because I'm speaking on, from my experience of the people over the last 20 years, and from my particular expertise, like Dr. Abu Jamei, as a psychiatrist, as somebody who's hearing the problems and listening to people and getting to know people, and who's able to present those problems in a very human and ordinary way to whoever I'm talking with. The other thing is we have this is something that I would just suggest to you. We have parallel programs in Israel and in Gaza. And that has been important also, because my job is not to take sides. My job is to be there to serve the people of Gaza, to work with my colleagues, and then to bring to the world's attention as best I can what is happening in Gaza as well as what we're doing. So I just want to encourage everybody, and maybe there'll be more discussion about that informally as well as formally, about how we can connect more deeply with Dr. Abu Jamei and Gaza Community Mental Health Program, and with the ordinary sort of life and experience of the people in Gaza, and bring it to the attention of an American public, which is quite unaware of most of what's happening. So let me stop there.
Mm-hmm.
I have some prepared comments for today, but I wanted first to thank you so much, Dr. Jamei, for your comments and for the people who have helped bring us together to talk today. And I was particularly touched by the comparison of the everyday life of families, of women, of children in Gaza, and the contrast with the children sleeping under the beds. It's heartbreaking. So, good afternoon to everyone. I would like to begin today by saying that I have a wish that in sharing our individual thoughts and perspectives, that each of us might leave today with an increased understanding about the complexity of the current crisis in Gaza. Ever since agreeing to participate in today's discussion panel, I've struggled with the idea of finding something to say that might be meaningful and helpful to each of us. After considerable time wandering around in my mind, I arrived at the idea that I might talk about the concept of mourning and its central importance in the process of healing. Rich and I traveled to the Holy Land 3 times, the first in the year 2000 as guests of Tom and Karen Getman, who are here today. And second and third visit as guests of our close Israeli friends who live in Haifa. At the time of our first visit, Tom, as country director for World Vision, was coordinating World Vision's sponsor of projects such as restoring irrigation systems and constructing schools to help rebuild infrastructure in Palestine. Tom organized for us our travel to the West Bank and Gaza, and he arranged a meeting with the then director of the Gaza Community Mental Health Center, Dr. Shiraz. Both Rich and I came away deeply disturbed at a gut level about the extent of trauma experienced on an ongoing basis by Palestinian people, and at that time, the scarcity of mental health resources, which I'm encouraged to hear are increasing. As clinicians, we were both aware of the frequency of PTSD for people in war-torn countries, and the reality that about 1/3 of those diagnosed with PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, have attempted suicide. We also knew that there is more to trauma than PTSD, including symptoms of massive psychic trauma in the face of death of families and members and friends, as we've heard about today, unresolved grief, survivor guilt, and importantly, intergenerational transmission of trauma. Nevertheless, we were impressed by the services offered by the Gaza Community Mental Health Center and cognizant of the reality that the above-mentioned trauma-related symptoms can be effectively treated in psychotherapy. And it's sad to hear that in Gaza, as well as in the United States, there's a tremendous prejudice against engaging in psychotherapeutic treatment. We came away from this meeting aware of the urgent need for mental health interventions, both in Palestine and in Israel. Of course, Israel has a great many resources, and that's why we are a part of the discussion today. I'd like to speak with you briefly about mourning. As a clinical social worker and a psychoanalyst engaged in providing individual psychotherapy for some 40 years, I work with individuals who come to see me with depression, as we've been hearing about in Gaza, anxiety, difficulty in their marriage, inability to maintain loving relationships, symptoms related to the sequelae of childhood neglect and abuse and trauma, struggles with physical illness, loss of a loved one. The list is endless. I see this in my private practice in Washington. Over the years, I've observed that so often people, despite wanting my help, have learned early on how to numb their psychic pain. They've developed ways to bypass experience of mourning and preferred despair over risking the uncertainty of hope and the possibility of change and an improved future. The reality is, in the face of loss, any one of us can be tempted to suppress or bury painful feelings. Alternatively, we can avoid the pain and sadness associated with losses by responding with anger, with rage, and retaliation. People often ask me Don't you end up feeling depressed when day after day you're sitting with and listening to people who are so unhappy, miserable in their lives, facing a myriad of problems, often despairing or suicidal? And I am sure people ask the question of you as well. It's a fair question, and I can honestly say that for me, the answer is no. I don't end up feeling depressed. As a therapist, as a psychoanalyst, I know that I must be able to feel along with my patient's pain. This is why it's so exhausting and draining in being a working therapist. However, I make the important distinction between depression and deep sadness. Healing, I believe, comes as a result of a gradual process of abandoning numbness, giving up energizing and often exhilarating feelings associated with anger and retaliation, and finding ways to tolerate deep sadness as a result of the process of mourning. I propose that it's useful to view the longstanding, ongoing daily horrors of the Israeli-Palestinian wars through the lens of unresolved mourning and its sequelae. Help is needed on an individual, but also on a societal and governmental level to support the daunting process of mourning with its various forms. And that my hope is that this will in turn allow for the possibility of hope for all people in the future. And I'd like to conclude my remarks today with a quote from Bishop Stephen Charleston's book, Ladder to the Light. And Bishop Charleston is a Native American Indian whose heritage in the United States includes pervasive historical trauma. And I quote, "Faith is perception. It is how we see." And I would also add how we feel. If we see the world around us as nothing but darkness, a darkness we believe we cannot change, then darkness is what we get. But if we see darkness while we believe in light, a light we cannot see but know is there, then we get something new. What we get is possibility, the possibility of change. It all comes down to trust. And thank you.
While we're getting our next speaker, we'd like to piece of paper for questions. Yeah, can you introduce yourself? That would be helpful.
Good afternoon. My name is Rich Sheffitz, and I'm a trauma psychiatrist working with a home office in Northwest Washington. It's a pleasure to be here, and I want to thank Nancy Murphy and the 501c3 that you head up, and Dr. Yasser, thank you for being here, and thank you for all the people who've supported the possibility of gathering today. I tried to anticipate what would be said, and what happened was I kept on coming up with the word impossible. And so I put some comments together and thought about working in the land of the impossible, because that's what's happening. That's what's going on. There's a Norwegian man, Fridtjof Nansen, who some time ago, as the former head of the League of Nations High Commission on Refugees, said, "The difficult is what takes a little time. The impossible is what takes a little longer." And that expression is not original to him, but you get the point, right? So how do you get through the day, Dr. Jamei? How does anybody who works in the realm of ongoing tragedy, social catastrophe, poverty, political bankruptcy, and the daily threat of new violence actually get through the day? I'd like to propose this happens in part by making true friends with others, valuing our shared humanity, insisting on the protection and cultivation of human dignity, and loving with a gentle ferocity. I also recommend sprinkling kindness and tenderness liberally as we go through the day. But before you start ringing the Pollyanna chimes, I'd like to tell you why I feel and think this way, if you can stand it. Because I spend most of the day as a trauma psychiatrist supporting the healing journeys of traumatized people who are just like the people gathered here today in this room. Their wounds, your wounds, my wounds are mostly invisible. Though if you're a careful observer, you'll sometimes notice how they disconnect their gaze and look either inwardly or at a distance too far away for anybody to see anything. It's in those moments people often broker consciousness for some kind of psychic pain. Sometimes that's accompanied by physical pain, but often enough it's a focus on a powerful surge of shame, humiliation, guilt, or loss too profound to speak, let alone to have the capacity to formulate. In a 2018 paper co-authored by Dr. Jamei, the lives of two children were highlighted. Nadia, the 17-year-old Gazan girl whose brother was killed by an Israeli aerial bombardment of the schoolyard in which she was standing some small distance from the school building where she was hiding. And Ahmad, a 10-year-old boy blinded in an explosion from Israeli shelling of the school in which his entire family was hiding. Sometimes it makes sense to sleep under your bed, you know? That's not crazy. When the world's crazy, it can make an individual look crazy. Both of these children have wounds from which they need to heal, and both have losses that can't be recovered. As Catherine asked, how do we assist their mourning? What do we have to actually offer them? So I'd like to call your attention to two things I think are important that may give some hints about working with the impossible in aiding Nadia and Ahmad. First, I'd like to name what I call the S word, shame. Second, I'd like to repeat a word implicit and explicit in our conversation today, dignity. Acute shame is a feeling maybe of embarrassment, perhaps a feeling of not measuring up, of having let others down, and a sense that one's value in the context of a relationship might be injured or reduced. Now, if you acknowledge it in those relationships, then there's repair of the rupture. If bypassed, then the shame digs in, a chronic suppuration of pain. And the shame that becomes chronic, the sense of I'm bad, worthless, or of no value, is at the center of a deep, very, very hard to heal wound. That kind of intensity morphs sometimes into humiliation experience, and the sense of devaluation may go deeper as if being judged in the eyes of a crowd, beyond redemption, defective, with no status. This deep relational wound can be repaired with new relating in a therapy relationship, but the path is arduous, and it's all about mourning, relatedness, loss, and so on. We've heard a fair amount about social and economic and political conditions in Gaza. But each of the people living there are having relationships. They're in families, and the families have their own dynamics. The families have their own struggles. There's a hierarchy all the way down from the international through the national into the community and the family until we get under the bed. Dignity is all about valuing the essence of all living things, and especially in respect to a knowing of our mutual vulnerabilities, as Harvard psychologist Donna Hicks has taught us through her work in Northern Ireland, South Africa, Nicaragua, and elsewhere. Dignity is a birthright, right? It'd be nice if everybody knew that and practice that, don't you think? It's an inherent quality of being human, and dignity violations are uniquely painful. Often it's the acknowledgement of shame experience that opens impasses to healing wounded dignity. Bypass shame is toxic because especially it leaves only action to express it, like violence. We see that every day in the violent expressions of wounded dignity. Acceptance of identity without asserting superiority, inclusion of others, acknowledgement and validation of the views of others, recognition of the worth in others, fairness so as to treat others even-handedly, giving the benefit of the doubt, encouraging independence of action toward new possibilities, and demonstrating accountability for our actions are all pro-dignity. And this attitude can and must be modeled each day for healing to occur. In the grip of traumatic experience, though, asserting dignity feels dangerous. Trusting seems out of the question. Hope just generates repeated disappointment. There's only doubt about safety. Exclusion is the norm. Preventing feelings of inferiority is a joke. Recognition doesn't occur. And instead of accountability, there's denial. There's no sense of fairness, only a superficial and pro forma regret for the tragedy all have witnessed. Our hope for the future rests in our capacity to know ourselves and each other, to cultivate bonds of friendship, and to insist on dignity for all. Please, please support the mission of the Gaza Mental Health Center. Make a new friend today. Thank you.
Okay, so we're going to turn to questions. Thank you for a great number of them. And we're going to do it by alternating between the questions I have here and ones from our Zoom audience. But I'd like to start with just a comment, not a question. I'd like to thank St. John's Norwood Church for hosting this event, Shelley Cohen Fudge, proud member of the Montgomery County's Jewish community and steering committee member of Jewish Voice for Peace, DC Metro chapter. And I'd like to add my thanks to St. John's as well. Okay, now for questions. Here is a question. Various things that you didn't get to mention in your remarks. The list of stressors in Gaza is endless. You've highlighted the crucial factors of poverty, unemployment, and bombardment. Could you talk briefly about two others, constant drone surveillance and the inability to leave the Strip?
Surveillance drones is a big issue in Gaza Strip. You know, there is something that is called double tapping, and double tapping occurs when during the attacks, the Israelis try to send a warning to the building that is going to be destroyed. They do it sometimes, but sometimes they don't. So one of the drones will just attack the building with a missile that can penetrate any wall or any or the ceiling or whatever. That is the warning. So immediately the people will understand that you have to leave before it's bombed. And that could be just a few minutes, maybe 2 or 3 or 4 minutes. That is something. Drones also sometimes are used to target and kill people who are in the streets. You know, they could be on a motorcycle or on a place, you know. So to us, these are not anymore considered surveillance drones. They are killing machines, basically. And the issue about them is that they continue to buzz 24/7, as they call. And when the night comes, when the silence is there, the only thing you hear is the sound of the buzzing drones, you know. And this is something that we struggle with because we call it cues of the traumatic events, things that remind the victims of trauma, of the traumatic event itself, you know. And this is something that we can call, it's one of the reasons why recovery is delayed and why relapse can happen at any moment. But these drones continue to be there at any moment. And I think one of the, there was one complete episode at BBC that talked about that. You can look into that. So it's one huge issue. The other thing was the
inability to leave the Gaza Strip.
Inability to leave. It's that's why we speak of Gaza Strip as an open air prison. This is since the blockade became or started about now 15 years and more ago. We have two passages. One is to exit through Israel, and the other one is to exit through Rafah, through Egypt. The conditions in the with Egypt was for a long time very difficult. I speak on the security conditions in Sinai, and that blocked for many years the ability to travel through Egypt. And that's why the only passage was through Israel. And you can refer to the WHO website because they have monthly reports on the passage of patients and their, let me say, companions. On average, 30% of the people who are referred to receive therapy or treatment outside Gaza Strip are denied or delayed appeal. You know, their permit is denied or delayed. The health sector in Gaza Strip is not that much good. All cases who need radiotherapy, they need to be transferred outside Gaza Strip. Who need chemotherapy, most of the cases need to be transferred outside Gaza Strip. And they need to be transferred to Palestinian hospitals in West Bank or in East Jerusalem. And in order to reach there, you need a permit. The refusal rate, rejection, and delayed rate is about 30% at its best. 43% of children who get the permits to go for therapy, 43% of them end up going with neither of their parents, because their parents are rejected. So they find another companion, which could be a grandmother, a grandfather, or someone like this. Nowadays, it's a lot better because conditions in Egypt are a lot better in Sinai. So the borders through Rafah are open, but on average, about 700 to 800 people can leave Gaza Strip per day. Through air is also some other amount of people can leave. But we speak about a population of 2.3 million people. In addition to people who would like to leave for health issues, we have students. More than 99% of the population in Gaza Strip and Palestine are literated people. We have among the highest educated people in the world. Among the graduates, we have more than 100,000 graduates who have their bachelor's degree, including, by the way, and ironically, 3,500 graduates of psychology. They are unemployed, the graduates of psychology. So when you remember of the kind of or the number of people who are in need for therapy or intervention or help or psychosocial support, and you look at the number of people who are, you know, unemployed, you just seems extremely ironic. Now, on the other hand, people who would like to go to Gaza, if you would like to go to Gaza, you need to apply for a permit that would allow you, the Israeli government will allow you to go into Gaza Strip. Now, they say that Gaza Strip is not under our control. They control Gaza from the sea, from the land, from the air, from everywhere. And you will need an Israeli approval to get into Gaza Strip. You know, that's how the conditions are. And this is a lengthy process. And if you are a lucky one, you will end up by visiting Gaza. So, and I make fun of it for people whom I see in Gaza, foreign people who visit. I say them, you are among the extremely lucky ones in the world who managed to get a permit to get into Gaza Strip, the biggest open air prison on the planet Earth, and perhaps in history. Please enjoy each second of being in Gaza. And that's what they sure try to do. So it's a big issue. If you would like to go outside, and I'll finish with this, I think 8 people got a Fulbright scholarship. Fulbright scholarship is a prestigious master scholarship in the United States that allows you to come to study for 2 years. Mostly it's like master's level public health or something similar to that. You are fully covered, everything, health insurance, monthly stipend, travel ticket, it's everything. And still, in certain occasions, the United States government had to ask, I wouldn't say, use another word, ask the Israeli authorities to expedite or to allow the exit of those people who are awarded those scholarships in Gaza Strip to be able to exit Gaza. And sometimes they were not that successful. I think it was one request that Hillary Clinton made, through which 8 students managed to exit Gaza, I think about 7 or 8 years ago. Imagine the foreign secretary had to intervene in order to make that happen. What is the problem with 8 university graduates flying to the States to get their education? Is that a threat to anyone by any means? I mean, I don't know. It's a question to everyone. I'm giving a very long answer. Sorry about it.
So we're going to take a question.
Lisa, I unmuted you so you can ask your questions from the Zoom.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. From all of us here joining remotely, we'd like to thank all the speakers. There's about 24 of us here. First question is that it's hard to imagine hope, yet speaking with some from Gaza, you do hear hope and pride in their lives. Can you talk a little about how that can be?
Well, May 2021 attack ended about mid-May. I don't remember the exact date. There were many of them, but and it was COVID-19 times also, you know. So they announced that the academic year have ended. It was supposed to continue for another week or 2, but that 11-day attacks just finished the 2 weeks, and they announced that it's okay, no more need to go to school. It was anyway online teaching, and in Gaza, online teaching is a joke because people don't have access to internet, don't have access to power supply, and you can imagine what kind of education that children had for 2 years, you know, because of social distancing and COVID-19. Anyway, into the school year, and the schools announced that children can come and take their certificates. It's a small paper that says that you are done with the 4th grade or the 5th grade. And it was on a Thursday, and I was on my way to work. And the children were dressed as if they were going to a wedding ball, you know. And that's what everyone does when you go to get the certificate at the end of the year. There was also another reason, because during those attacks, we missed one of the feasts, you know. If I remember, it was, I think, one of the Eids, you know, the feast. And usually people try to buy something new to their children or prepare something for that. So anyway, the idea is that I was driving, and I have seen those young kids, you know, boys and girls, all very well dressed, walking and jumping over the wreckage of the destroyed houses, going to their schools or coming back from their schools with a wide smile on their faces. How could we lose hope when we have such kids, you know? It's impossible to lose hope. And luckily, more than half of the population in Gaza are kids. So they are everywhere, everywhere. And when they, you know, when it's time to leave the school, I just said, you know, about between 11 and 12, some children going to the schools and some children going back from the schools. 500,000 children are on the streets of Gaza Strip between 11 and 12. We end up just thinking day and night, how can we help those young kids grow bolder, smarter, more educated? And that's what they give us hope. And that's what also gives us hope. So that's one example of how we receive hope and from where we get hope.
Several of these questions relate to children, and I'm going to cluster them in interests of time. What form does trauma take for children? Describe some examples at length. And there's another question: how applicable is PTSD to Gaza when Gaza's trauma is not post but present? And there was one final thing. Can you elaborate with an example or two of your description of diagnosing the problems of a child by asking them to play with a toy?
Okay, so okay, let's try to make sense in the way I answer those questions. First, children show trauma in different ways than others because of different reasons that I will not go into, including their cognitive abilities, their capacity to abstract thinking, to apprehend the danger, for example, the risk assessment, blah, blah, blah. There are different things. So sometimes children, they manifest trauma or the fear that they have in the form of some somatic or bodily complaints, which means pain in the knees, for example, in the ankles, in the abdomen, sometimes failure to thrive. Young babies who sometimes start to reject even their mother's milk, you know. They do not anymore drink, they do not anymore eat, they just stop doing that. Some of older children, sometimes they come with poor appetite, with loss of weight. So this is one manifestation, which is like bodily symptoms, you know, some somatic presentations. Other presentation, and we see that frequently during the attacks and immediately after the attacks. These are the more severe forms. Sometimes it appears just in the terms of night terrors or night horrors, you know. The child will wake up in the middle of the night screaming, will scream during the middle of the night, you know. Parents will come, wake him up or wake her up, and it's difficult to do that. But once the child is awakened, the child will not remember what was going on with him or with her. They will not even recall the dream. That's why we call it night terrors. And this is more for younger children, you know. Older children, they just come with nightmares. They remember what's wrong. They can wake up. So sleeping problems. Another one is bedwetting, as I said. And this can be for children between the age of 4, 5, 6, 7, until the children of age even 12 or 13. We have seen that for children like who are 13 or 14. And then if they are a little bit older, it comes in the form of PTSD as with adults, you know. Some other manifestations that we see are apparent in the community. At schools, for example, you see low school achievement. Children are not performing well at schools. Their academic achievement is dropping a lot, you know. Or it could be an increased quarrel between children, you know. You have a lot of anxieties, a lot of, you know, children tend to start to misbehave. Parents or teacher, they will say that the children are misbehaving. Well, it's another way of showing the anxiety because they cannot really talk about it. Sometimes children who are like 4 or 5 stop obeying their parents, you know, which is unusual, you know. What happened to the child? Well, it's a way of getting attraction. So you have different manifestations, and you have really to educate the society about these things, how you can understand the child and how you can deal with it. That's why the play therapy room is very important. So we have the therapy room full of toys. You can ask the child to pick any toy to play with. One child will go to a structure that resembles the family or the neighborhood, a house, or family structures like the whole family. It shows that's a father, mother, and then 3 children. And they will start playing with those structures. And you will start to hear what the child says, you know. The child starts expressing and talking what's in his or in her mind. So toys come in the form of an assessment tool, something to help with the diagnosis, but also something to help with the therapy. Because through talk therapy, you start to try to reconstruct, make the children understand more, make the children get rid of their fears. And that's why play therapy is important. Sometimes those children will go and pick a toy that is a jet fighter, for example. We have those toys. And he will use it just to show how difficult life is. Look, it's coming. Look, it's bombing. My cousin got killed. The ambulance came, and they will start showing that problem. Sometimes parents are not aware. They know that the child have seen something, but they are not aware how that ended up with the child having the symptoms, what kind of symptoms. So this is something that keep happening every now and then, that the play therapy room is one of key and central to the issue. Drawing. Sometimes children don't like to talk at all. They don't like to speak. So you just give them a crayon and ask them to draw whatever comes to their mind. And they will draw, for example, an ambulance car. Or they will draw a Palestinian flag. Or they will draw a dead body, someone who's laying on the ground with red blood show, and they start to talk about it. PTSD is something that a lot of Palestinians say it's not applicable to Palestine. Well, I'm not going to say whether it's applicable or not, but I would like to say that we never reach the post-trauma time when help is immediately there, when people can feel that everyone is supporting them, whether the community, whether the government, whether the international community. Today, and sorry to bring this, it's not just an example. You have heard what happens in Turkey, the earthquake. You have seen the photos and pictures. Help came in from all different areas of the world. That is something that never happened in Gaza. Never happened in Gaza for the last 15 years. There is a big question on how, when, and it takes ages until support comes. Support comes only from the inside. Our psychological first aid teams, they are the ones who are in the first day. They are going and visiting families. A male and a woman, both psychologists, they visit houses, house to house, and they try to provide psychological first aid. People who are just going out of the traumatic events, they try to go and help others. And that is something that is really unique. Another thing that the earthquake brought, and I was a little bit surprised, maybe not, I shouldn't be surprised. It's shame for me, a mental health professional, to be surprised of that. But I keep contacting with people in Gaza, and you know what they told me? They told me when they see now the young children coming out from under the wreckage alive, when no one else in the family is alive, reminds them a lot of things that were happening in Gaza. Of course it reminds them. Of course it reminds them. And I'm sure if you are following the news in May or in 2014, May 2021, you have seen a lot of that coming. We have certainly several cases that only one kid or two kids survived from one whole family. But that's how things are.
Lisa, back over to you.
Thank you. Another question's come in. Are peer community members engaged in the treatment to soften the introduction into mental health treatment?
Can you repeat the question? Peer community.
Can you repeat that, Lisa?
Sure. Are peer community members engaged in the treatment to soften introduction into mental health treatment?
Well, all the management plans that our psychiatrists and psychologists agree to implement to help any case involves family participation, at least, for example, for children or for adults. But sometimes also we go to schools and we involve school counselors and sometimes school teachers. So that's very important part of what we do, is to bring everyone on board in order to support the clients or the patients, because at the end of the day, it's 1 or 2 sessions per week, but the family is all the time around them. Family structures is one of the most important dynamic that help people survive, and we need to keep them involved. And also it's important to say that we all the time try to educate the community at large through TV programs, radio programs, through our Facebook website, or page, because bringing awareness is central to the work that we are doing. We have also a toll-free line. Anyone who is not sure what's happening, who needs an advice, who doesn't want to come to the community center, they can just call free of charge and check how are things with them.
So some of our questions are basically saying, isn't this as much a political issue as a humanitarian one? This is not, like an earthquake. This is man-made. And one questioner asked, in your visits to members of Congress and other leaders, did they commit to helping Gazans? How? I'll help you with that one.
Well, it's, I'll tell you one thing, which is crazy, that I find it really crazy, that I find people during my visits, they come with more despair than the one I carry, if I carry despair after all, and this is something that I don't feel really good about, It shouldn't be that way. I mean, we are not giving up in Palestine. Why you are giving up? I mean, this is nonsense. Sorry, guys, to say it like that. I know that you are on the right people, but I mean, I know many people who thought, okay, this is not going to be solved in the coming 10 or 20 or 30 years. So let's do another fight. Haha. Well, don't be cowards, just stand for the right fight. And we are fighting just for justice, for dignity, as Dr. Shepard said. He touched very important things, all the discussions were very, very accurate and nice. Whether talking about dignity, whether talking about the feeling of loneliness, abandonment, or whether they talk about, grief or mourning. These are very important. These are our basic things that we feel on daily basis, The question of dignity and the question of loneliness, the question of abandonment, the question of grief, it's like salt in our food. That's how things are. That's our daily life. And I have a very dear colleague who is here sitting and looking at me from there, Professor Brian Barber. He have lived in Gaza, I don't know, for many years during the last 3 or 4 decades. And he have followed a lot of young people, so seeing them grow, seeing them get married, seeing them build families, seeing them care for their children, and now staying with their children even and following up them. I don't know if you could, Brian, just say a couple of words about whatever comes to your mind. I would appreciate it. But after we take one question, sorry to surprise you, but you can think of something, I'm sure. Yeah.
Right. So
next question, maybe from Zoom, if there's something.
Lisa, do you have another question?
Yes, thank you. The Gaza Mental Health Center provides outpatient care. What possibilities exist for inpatient care for more severe cases? What happens to those people?
We refer them to the psychiatric hospital. And then if they accept, then that's fine. If they don't accept at all, and that's the case in many cases, we try our best to help them as much as we can. But usually they should, and we refer them to the psychiatric hospital. Yeah.
So that question relates to, is the Palestinian government helping to address mental health needs? Are there many Palestinian NGOs like GCMHP that are trying to help the situation?
WHO says that globally, less than 2%, globally I'm saying, less than 2% of the health budget across the world, less than 2% goes to mental health. So globally, mental health is not given the needed priority. Before COVID, again, globally, they say that 1 in 8 people, again, globally, I'll be doing a lot of globally things now. 1 in 8, they need some kind of mental health support, or they could be even having a diagnosis. After COVID, globally, again, some say 1 in 4, some say 1 in 5. We all know that the governments are not taking mental health seriously, you know. During my visit here to some different places, I heard that even some services are shut down, you know. And this is not in the States, this is in many other places. In Palestine, the government interest is more into chronic illnesses, the provision of basic drugs like for diabetic patients, for patients with hypertension, trying to find support for cancer therapy patients, you know, and they are not that much, they do not succeed that much in that, you know, the needs are all the time a lot. We try to ask people to pay the needed attention to this issue, but the needs are massive, and it's not only in mental health, in many different things. So that was the first part. The second part was about?
The second part, I don't know.
Anyone remembers what was the second part about?
Other organizations. If I could just add onto that, another question was about how much funds are coming into Gaza?
Yes. So we have different levels of intervention, and different organizations try to operate at different levels. There is the psychosocial support. There are many organizations who work at the level of psychosocial support, which means help children at schools, organize some fun activities for children, do some counseling services. UNRWA, for example, and Ministry of Education has a school counselor in each school, which is one person for almost 700 to 900 students or pupils. That's how it is. The non-governmental sector, civil society organizations are trying their best when it comes to the therapy level. When you have multidisciplinary teams that includes a psychiatrist who can prescribe and give medication, it's only GCMHP, but at the level of providing counseling services, we have many organizations, including, for example, the Mind and Body Center, including the Center for Democracy and Mental Health, it's called, and some like other 4 or 5 organizations. But we are all understaffed. We are all having problems with funding. We need to raise funds continuously. GCMHP is well accredited and well known for their professionality at work, but also for our admin and financial standards. We are supported mainly by European governments, who provide us with about 60 to 65% of our funding, but the remaining funds comes through fundraising, and that's how we are provided with funds. The Boston-based Gaza Mental Health Foundation kept supporting us for the last 20 years, and that's through mainly to money that is collected from generous donors, who are mainly people who think of means or ways to support the population in Gaza Strip. Brian, do you have something to add? Come, please.
While Brian comes, let me add something that you all can do in addition to funding. The question about members of Congress. We have been to many congressional offices. We have about 30 more to go. We have heard the story of, we can't touch the Gaza Strip. That's, we'll get in trouble. We'll get hate mail. They have to hear from you. They have to hear that it's really important to change the situation, because our $3.8 billion in aid is going to maintain this situation. So I urge you all, in addition to writing checks or whatever you can do, talking to your neighbors about the situation, to let your elected representatives hear from you. Brian.
So Yasser is staying at my home in DC, and he's not getting dinner tonight for putting me on the spot like this. I'll be brief. For those of us who have tried to understand Gaza thoroughly, there's a tension that's hard to get our minds around. First, we want to make clear the degree of suffering that occurs in the Strip, and there's no end to that suffering. On the other hand, Gazans are proud people, and they don't like to be seen as numbers, just the number of poverty, their number of killed or bombarded. And I would just like to say that in my long experience, the most severe pain comes from the violation of the dignity that we've talked about. These are human beings of the highest caliber. I've never met people who are more hospitable and kind than the Gazans, and I've been going there 30 years. They don't deserve to suffer any of this, but at least let's give them some rights. Let's give them maybe 24 hours of electricity. How about that? Instead of, in some years I was there, it was 2 per day, 2, 3, or 4 hours per day. How about the ability to just leave and go to the West Bank for a day? Go to Jerusalem to pray at the mosque for a day. I'm guessing that over 90% of young people, teenage people, have never stepped a toenail outside of Gaza. These basic dignities are the essence of, I think, most of the suffering in Gaza. And what we can advocate for is just basic standards of human dignity and rights. And I think that's what we can do.
Thank you very much.
So we're staying here in the parish hall because we've lost the Zoom connection. They can still listen, but they not able to ask questions. I think they were out of questions. I would like to make one comment. Mary said that if anyone wants to write a check, you can put it in the straw baskets on either side of the room. And then Nancy, back to you.
Yeah. If there is someone who can write a check, I don't know if you travel with checkbooks these days. It's made out to the Gaza Mental Health Foundation. If you would like to donate but do not have a checkbook, you can look at our website. All of that is available in this flyer. The website takes online donations or, cash donations. I think the green stuff still works as well. But thank you for your attention and for really caring about this issue. One final question. It's for me. What kind of messaging works best to open the minds of members of Congress about Gaza? Well, let me just say my experience was meeting people. My experience was meeting people standing in the wreckage of their homes and saying, when are you Americans going to understand that we Palestinians are human beings too? And this is the message I take to members of Congress. It's our tax dollars that have been destroying a whole people. And towards what end? They're not, this is not going to make for a future in which Israelis and Palestinians can live side by side. So if you say you support 2 states, which they give lip service to, even as the 2-state chimera is disappearing, well, then you should start treating Palestinians with dignity and recognize that they have human rights. And the connection between human rights and mental health, I think, is primary in the situation of the Gaza Strip. Let me just say that there's been a real opening in terms of people wanting to hear, members of Congress and their staff wanting to hear about Gaza. That was good. When we send out an invitation, we got a whole lot of replies. Yes, please schedule an appointment. So that shows
there's an opening. But there is this fear factor. It's not only children in Gaza who live with fear. It appears that our elected members of Congress also live with fear that somehow, you know, they may have hate, some sort of hate messaging directed against them. They might not get elected next time. I mean, they've got to get some backbone, for heaven's sakes. These are our elected representatives. If we can say to them, look, do the right thing, and you will have support in the community. That's the other message I take. My own personal representative has moved a lot because we in Cambridge, Massachusetts have been talking to her. She's now one of the so-called squad, and she stands up for Gaza, but she tells me how hard it is because she gets constantly trashed. And that is unacceptable. And you know, for people who do the right thing to be submitted to this. So they have to hear from us that we respect what you're doing and we will give you our support. So I hope many people in this room will be in touch with representatives who do the right thing and tell them we are with you.
Hey, thanks again, everyone, for coming. We have a lot of food and refreshments in the back and still several hours until the Super Bowl. So you're welcome to hang out and discuss the event and have some of the refreshments that we have. Thanks again for coming. And thank you, Dr. Jamei.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.